So let's get started with just a broad overview of IO psychology, what it is, why it's important, why we enjoy studying it, and all that fun stuff. So broad definition of IO psychology we have up here. Scientific study of working, application of psychological principles to the workplace, and issues facing individuals, teams, and organizations. So the biggest piece of this definition that's important for us is the fact that we are scientists who also interface with organizations. Everyone who is in this program sees themselves as science practitioners. That means that we conduct research in our labs, we conduct research via grants, and then we provide forward ideas, forward suggestions, best practices to organizations at large about the research we've conducted. So this is a point of pride for us because our research doesn't end with us. We actually get to see it impact organizations moving forward. And truly, I think this brings a lot of people to the field of IO is that we like working with organizations, and at the same time, we see the need for research driving our decisions, not just we go into an organization and we make decisions based on what we think is the best need for the organization. So this is very much a point of pride for IO and how we conduct our research. And as it says up here also, we apply scientific method to study those issues. So again, this is tied out to the work we do in our labs. It's tied out to the research we're doing with different student groups, with different organizations, and so it broad range in terms of what that means and how we apply it forward. Also, if you are not aware, the difference between industrial and organizational, those are two separate buckets when it comes to what IO psychology is. The industrial side of things, it has to deal with more systemic impacts and change. So it's talking about things like how do we recruit effective employees to our organization? Then once they get there, how do we train them? How do we make sure they have a pathway for development? So all of things that are related to the system at large within the organization. And then also tied out to things like performance evaluation. So how do we make sure that our employees know what they need to be doing and whether or not they're doing it effectively? Organizational side, it's more environmental in terms of what impact it has. So we're not just looking at systemic things now, we're also looking at more broad range things. So like the climate of the organization. Do we have an organization that has a safety culture? If we're dealing with something where, we might be in a factory for a lot of our time on the job, and we need to make sure we're following safety standards. Also, do we have effective leaders? Do we know what effective leadership looks like for our organization? These are very theory-heavy type questions, and a lot of this stuff is directly tied out to some of the research that we conduct here and can be applied to organizations, but again, it depends on whatever the environment of the organization is. So this is probably one of the biggest questions I get asked whenever I have prospective students meet with me, and I'm interested in IO psychology. Why is it a good decision to make to go into this field, and also why did I get into this field? So I'll start with why I got into this field, just so you are aware. I got into this field simply because I was a philosophy undergrad and I didn't know where to go, but I did a psychology minor, and I was really intrigued with the idea of intercultural communication and organizational communication, and I really wanted to apply that to things like leadership. So it was a wide berth from my philosophy degree, but I found that, this was stuff that really jived with me. And that was back before these indices you're seeing here are as high as they were. And it just seemed like a really fun fit. But in terms of just hard stats and why it is a good job to have, number one reason up here is that we are currently ranked as the best science job. So number one in terms of best science jobs by US News and World Report. We're ranked as number 13th in terms of the best STEM jobs out there. And as you can see, these trends are just going up over the years. And that's because our our unit of IO psychologists is essentially growing. We see massive growth within our PSYOP, which is our major organization which studies IO psychology that we are all members of. And also we're seeing that still have very competitive payment in terms of once you get your degree and you leave, what you could be making. So you could see that the median salary there is around $139,000. That's awesome, considering that, you leave, you get your degree, and depending what path you go, it can look very different in terms of what you pay. But a median of 139 is very nice and lets you survive no matter where you are in the world for the most part. I shouldn't quite say that. I haven't lived in all of the places that you could be, but it is a nice salary. Also here, what you can see is basically that it doesn't matter what path you take. You go the management route, you go internal to organization route, or you go the non-management route. You can make your way up the chain with an IO psychology degree. So more often than not, you're going to start as what we call an individual contributor. So these are people who are in the associate assistant roles. And then from there, you have a pathway upward to essentially the executive suite if you so desire. More often than not, I would say that we typically walk into the individual contributor land and then get up into manager of managers. And, pending what our students want to do and where they end up after the fact, we might see people in executive range, but more often than not, I'd say we see people in manager roles. And then if you're looking at this from the academic side of things, then you start out as an assistant professor, work your way to associate. You have the ability to work up to full and then even out into dean, stuff like that. So, there's a broad range in terms of what you can get yourself into and the roles you can have within organizations, whether they be applied or academic in nature. Then the really important part is, where are our students? So this should give you some indication as to the types of organizations our students have left and worked for. So on the business end, we have students who have left and have worked for large organizations like Expedia, like T-Mobile, like FedEx. And it's really important to note here that we do our best to keep up with these students. And a lot of the time we have alumni reach out directly to us with opportunities for internships, with opportunities with job postings. I think we just passed around an internship opportunity from T-Mobile, actually. So these are students that they leave the program, but they're still communicating directly with us and still are giving us opportunities, which is a wonderful thing to have. It's wonderful to know that our alumni basically have our back and want the best for the students even after they leave the program. We have a lot of students go into consulting work, and that can range from small consulting organizations to larger ones like Aptima, SHL. And we've had students work for Gallup, but we've had students intern for Gallup over the summer. One of my students has done that. And it's all in terms of just very good experiences, just getting a broad range of here's what consulting looks like and figuring out whether or not you're interested from that internship perspective. We also have students who are working in government. Now with Ensight on the table, we are seeing more students interested in working with government, which is awesome. One of my students just got a job with CISA. So that is very exciting for all of us. And we're looking forward to growing what we have there in terms of the students that go into government. And then in terms of academia, we have students who are interested in academia that wind up in academia. I had one of my students graduate and go to Texas A&M. So there aren't any listed there, but there are opportunities if you want to ask us, like, what kind of universities could you wind up in via academia? We're happy to answer that for you. Then any other information you're interested in terms of salary, in terms of just broad information about IO psychology in terms of the type of content you will be or should be learning in graduate school, definitely check out psyop.org. They have a wonderful set of just resources that you can tap into as a student. They also have resources for organizations. So very good read if you are not familiar. And also, I would say if you want to go into IO psychology, it's just important for you to familiarize yourself with PSYOP because it will be a term that you hear all the time because at least once a year we're panic applying to get in our stuff into PSYOP. So it is something that every graduate student is well aware of, and it is a very familiar name for us. Switching a little bit to our program and just giving you an understanding of what our IO psychology program looks like at UNO. So we have 3 options. The first option is an MS program, Master of Science program. This is a 2-year master's program. It is very applied focus in terms of not having a thesis and the primary focus of the program being a practicum experience for the student. So this is one that typically students that want to go directly from here into an organization, this is typically where they land. The MA PhD route, this is if you do not have a master's degree already and you want to get your PhD, this is what you would be applying for. So this allows you to get your Master of Arts on the way to your PhD. This is a 5 to 6 year program and a thesis is required for this. So this is going to be the more, I guess, traditional experience in the sense that you are coming in, you're going to work with an advisor on a thesis. Then after you're done with your thesis, you're going to work with an advisor on a PhD dissertation. So more traditional in terms of the experience and what's covered. PhD route, this is for students who already have their master's degree in IO or in another related field. And this typically takes about 3 to 4 years because you're already coming in with a master's. So another reason why UNO is a very good option is that we are heavily promote not just science practice, but also interdisciplinary work. We have what is called the Center for Collaboration Science here, which is basically a group of professors who deal with a broad range of different topics. So there are professors from arts and sciences, there are professors from information technology, and basically they all work together to come up with novel, unique ideas. So I know CCL does things with like human machine collaboration. There's a lot of teams and leadership type stuff in CCL. And also I think Insight is bundled into there as well because Gina Ligon is part of it. So it's a wonderful way to know that we are interested in not only working with people who are similar to us in terms of our interests, in terms of what we study, but also those who are outside of our wheelhouse and coming up with those novel creative ideas that can only emerge when we work with people who have different ideas, different knowledge from us. So that is a big focus for us, is this idea of driving interdisciplinary research. That's also exhibited through work with Insight, which is a counterterrorism research group. Sam can talk a little bit about it when he does his slide, but it is really a big push for us, and in terms of making sure that we get grants to basically through the Department of Defense to pick up on counterterrorism research and figure out how we can help the United States at large. Then other faculty have worked directly with healthcare, with engineering, and have done research with them as well. So we have a lot of just crossing of hairs, crossing of wires in terms of the type of the research that's done here. So it makes it a really interesting program, and it makes it really fun for you if you are interested in any specific context like healthcare, like engineering, because the faculty you work with will probably be able to give you those types of connections. And also a note is that we are very collaborative from a department perspective. I've worked with Roni directly, I've worked with other faculty members directly, and it's really important for us to foster this type of environment, to make sure that Our students have the ability to go work with other faculty if they'd so desire, that our students have the opportunity to go talk to other students in other labs, to attend other lab meetings. Again, that whole idea of giving you exposure to knowledge which is outside your wheelhouse, which is not necessarily something that you are truly familiar with, can lead to creative ideas, can lead to a better experience for graduate students. So we really try to foster that type of atmosphere here. And again, we bring up science practice model because it is something that we try and put into everything we do. Most courses here, if not all courses here, have some sort of focus on not only the research itself, but then how can we apply it out into organizations. Some of the courses here also have components which are you need to go into an organization and you need to actually apply what you've learned to a team, to a organization in terms of the type of training that they need, and so on and so forth. So we really try to blend together that experience for you, so you're not just getting the ivory tower, having you read articles and then just consume those and not think about what it looks like in the real world. And then one other unique piece is that we allow the opportunity for you to switch from your MA to MS. So let's say you've applied for an MA or for an MS and you wanted to do the 2 years and go get a job in an organization. After a year, you recognize, hey, maybe I actually want to get a PhD. Maybe I really like the research side of things and I want to focus in on that, then we will allow you that opportunity to potentially switch out to the MA PhD track. And that's a decision that would be made by you and your advisor and the rest of the program itself in terms of the faculty. So the opportunity is there. It's not guaranteed, but it is there if you are interested in switching from one to the other. And the same can be vice versa. You come in MA PhD, you think you want to go into academia, but then you recognize after you get a practicum or after you do an internship, hey, this is what I really want to do. Let me just switch out and be done in 2 years. That we're also open to that as well. So in terms of the formal process, we have a deadline of January 10th, and our decisions are typically made in February. So it's a pretty quick turnaround in terms of when we get all of the applications and then when we go through them and make our decisions. Our GRE is optional. That does mean that you can submit it if you'd like, but it is not required. So if you do submit it, we will just acknowledge it as a piece of information that we can look at. But if you do not submit it, you will not be judged based on the fact that it is not submitted. We tend to try to evaluate the whole person whenever we are looking at your application package. So in other words, we look at every piece, and if we notice one might be lacking or one is extra strong, we keep looking across the board to get a better idea as to who you are as a whole. This is really important for us as faculty members because we want to make sure that your interests and who you are aligns with how we work, how we lead, how we mentor, and things like that. So we try and take a very holistic approach to evaluating the application packages. Last note here, and this is one that we do get asked pretty often, is do you have to identify a faculty member that you want to work with? The answer is no, you don't have to, but you can. So if you know that you're interested in working with teams, then you can say that you want to work with me. If you're interested in creativity, you can work with Roni. But again, the beautiful thing about this is that we all have our hands in different buckets. So if you are interested in a topic that isn't even represented by one of us, you could still find someone who would be willing to work with you and would be interested in whatever that topic is. So just be aware of that. You don't need to mark a faculty member you want to work with, and that will not affect how your application package is judged. Admission requirements, you need 15 hours of psychology coursework, and the required coursework, the only two required courses that you have to have are stats for behavioral science and research methods. And then largely when we talk about what we're looking for in your package, making sure that research experience in behavioral sciences is present is going to help you out big time, because that is going to be something that shows us that you've had exposure to a lab in the past, and because you've had exposure to a lab, you know what is the type of work involved in those labs. Our acceptance rates, they are, we take about 8 to 10 students a year with application pool of around 40 to 60. So fast math, that's about 15 to 20% acceptance rate on average. And for your MA PhD track, like I said on the previous slide, research will matter, but it'll matter more so for those roles because in those situations, you're going to be doing things like a dissertation, and we want to make sure that you have some sort of experience with the expectations of what good research is. So having that will help your package move forward. And then if you are coming in with a master's and you're applying directly for a PhD, one note here is that applicants will be admitted by individual faculty directly. So if you are interested in coming in with a master's, the suggestion there would be talk to a faculty member that aligns with whatever your research interest is and see if they're willing to take a PhD student for that semester. That is a little bit different in terms of everyone is going to have eyes on the application package, but an individual faculty member will make the decision in the end. Then with regard to funding, we can currently say that all of our students are funded, even though funding is not guaranteed by us. Our students do a wonderful job finding funding if we don't have any available, but a lot of the time we do. So right now we have students who are currently doing teaching assistantships, which are run-of-the-mill. You work with a faculty member, you help them throughout the semester on whatever course needs they have. We have students who are being funded via grants on graduate assistantships. And this ranges from students who are in their second year all the way through. So, I mean, it's not outside of the realm of possibility for you to have a graduate assistantship earlier on in your career as a graduate student. And then we also have students who are doing paid internships, which fund them, and that is external to the university itself. And then also in terms of the graduate teaching assistantships, they both include stipends for you to basically cover your cost of living. And then also they have tuition waivers for fall, spring, and summer, so throughout the entire year. All right, so for this next part, we're just going to introduce ourselves, we being the faculty, and we're going to talk about our research interests. So I'm going to get started, and my name's William Kramer. I born and raised in Florida, actually. So this is Nebraska was a bit of a shift for me for the cold, but I love doing work on teams. I love looking at how people collaborate. I love especially looking at how we collaborate in unique and really high stress contexts like military, like virtual teams, where it's outside the norm of face-to-face collaboration. And I really like to look at how external events impact teams, whether that be we have something go on where we need to immediately adapt to it, or we have something internal to the organization happen where now we're dealing with, we lost a team member. How do we react to that loss of a team member? And how do we move forward? Or maybe we just learned that we need to be trained on a new process, a new procedure, and we need to incorporate that into our new schema. So I'm really interested in how people collaborate together, how to maximize and make that effective, and then also all of the fuzzy contexts that can happen that can change those behaviors. And then I also have a natural love for just looking at novel statistical approaches, so looking at things like latent profile analysis or structural equation methods and all that fun stuff. So some things out there that I have on the horizon, I'm happy to talk to you about in the breakout rooms. But I'm going to pass it off now to Roni.
Good evening. Let's see if my video cooperates. Yes. So my interest focused on creativity and innovation, both at the individual level and at the team level. So at the individual level, I'm interested particularly on how individual people think, the thought processes associated with creativity, particularly things that happen before idea generation or brainstorming, and those things that happen after we generate ideas. Those are less researched, we know less about them, so understanding those is important and meaningful. I'm interested in how we measure creativity. Um, so one of the things we find in creativity research is that creativity is measured in multiple and different ways that are not always related to one another, which is a little disconcerting when you're trying to understand how to improve something. I'm interested in team creativity. So how do we take individuals and have the team responsible for creative outcome, both from the cognitive perspective? So how do teams aggregate those individual cognitive processes, but also the social processes associated with team creativity that facilitate or hinder creativity? In addition, I'm interested in within team creativity, particularly with interdisciplinary teams. So my own experience with interdisciplinary teams led me to um, believe that they are a great benefit, but also can have difficulties that are augmented beyond those of just more homogeneous teams. And then how do team leaders lead for creativity and innovation? A couple of things that are not listed here that I've been doing some work in. One is malevolent creativity. I've been doing a little bit of work in that area. You'll hear probably more about it from others. So creativity for negative purposes, like crime, and then looking at AI and creativity. So does AI help creativity? Does it hinder creativity? Is AI a partner for creativity? And under what conditions is AI good or bad for creative output? And that's it.
To Abby.
Hi, my name's Abby Fulberg. I should probably update this slide a little bit. But when I talk about my research, I think about sort of two separate streams. The first is the impacts of stereotyping and prejudice on marginalized group members. I focus primarily on issues related to gender and race, although I've done some work on sexual orientation. In some of these projects, I've contributed my substantive expertise to health-related research. So I have a pending grant with the National Institutes of Health looking at the health impacts of anti-Asian racism on Asian Americans. But most of my work in that area looks at the impacts of gender stereotypes on women. And my lab specifically looks at how different conceptualizations of gender stereotypes may help us to better understand the factors that impede gender equality. And we look at that in terms of women's career outcomes, their career aspirations, and also in terms of the systemic forces that grant less power to women, even though our lab is finding that they're increasingly perceived as at least as, if not more competent than men. On the other side of that, I think when we think about or when we are able to characterize the negative impacts of prejudice, it makes a strong case for the need for prejudice reduction initiatives. And I look at that at both the individual and organizational level. So at the organizational level, I think about how our social and socio-political climate impacts the effectiveness of organizational diversity initiatives and how the success of those initiatives or organizations' willingness to perhaps dispense with those initiatives may impact marginalized employees. At the individual level, I look at different prejudice reduction techniques such as prejudice confrontation, so the act of disrupting a prejudiced act or remark by indicating disapproval, for example, saying, well, that was racist. And my current research looks at how people's social relations and social context impact their willingness to confront prejudiced remarks. This is a change from some of the prejudice confrontation literature which typically doesn't examine social relationships. But I think that's a missed opportunity because we know that one of the things or one of the main reasons why people fail to confront prejudice is because they're worried about the social costs of doing so, which implicates social processes and social relations in people's decisions. And that's basically me.
Thank you. Next up is Sam.
Good evening, everyone. Good to see you. My name is Sam Hunter. I research lab is the Leadership and Innovation Lab. And you'll see a number of students here on that are part of that research lab. I study two things. I study leadership and I study creativity and innovation. I study the good guys and the bad guys doing that. So a lot of my work these days is at Insight, where we apply what we know about IO psychology to understanding terrorist and extremist organizations. I think our field actually has a lot to offer. The bad guys organize too, and what we know about our field, whether it's selection or hiring or training or leadership, the bad guys are doing that stuff. And so if we can understand that, we can disrupt and stop it as well. One of the newer areas that isn't on the slide is work around masculinity and misogyny, which we're seeing is a bit of a thread that connects a lot of the extremist beliefs and ideologies. And so we've got a paper that we're working on there that I'm excited about, and a few other projects that are along those lines as well. I'll turn it back over to you, Billy.
Awesome, thank you. Next is Mahima.
Hi, everyone. I'm Mahima Saxena, and my research expertise is in broadly two areas. One is occupational health psychology, which basically concerns worker health and well-being. So I'm really interested in looking at things such as job burnout. What's job burnout? How does it develop? How does it impact employees in the context of work, but then also outside of work? So I look at things like, how do people pay attention? What about emotional states in response to job burnout? How do we alleviate burnout? Can it impact sleep? So on and so forth. So I'm very interested broadly in this bidirectional association between work and health and overall employee well-being. And then the other area that I'm really interested in is called humanitarian work psychology, which basically takes a pro-social lens to using IO psychology to understand workers and work experiences that have traditionally not been looked at IO psychology. So what that means is I study and interface quite a bit with workers in poverty, workers that are typically not attached to organizations. They may be engaged in informal work, gig work, alternate or non-traditional work arrangements, and they often tend to be part of the informal economy, which, by the way, 2/3 of the world's workforce is in the informal economy. So that's something that I am very interested in and tend to study. And as part of that, I look at sort of traditional indigenous skills. I look at things like decent work. So really just looking at things like calling and work meaningfulness. So trying to really understand work almost in a vacuum, right? What does it mean for us to be working in a productive, meaningful manner? And then one of the things that I've been looking at in the last year or so, I would say the last couple of years quite a bit, is sustainable livelihoods. The basic premise being that work is as we understand it nowadays, there are elements of it that are unsustainable. So how can we make work sustainable, not just for the individual, but for society as a whole as well? Other things that are sort of mentioned here, but I am really heavily involved with at the moment are STEM organizations. So organizations that primarily deal with science, technology, engineering, and math workforce. That's another area that I'm really interested in and tend to collaborate with folks in computer science and technology on, and I am part of a big grant that is exploring technology workforce in the United States, as well as those in construction engineering. And then in terms of research approach, I tend to be more of a mixed methods person. So I've trained myself over the years and lately have been using quite a bit of qualitative research methodology in terms of research approaches that I tend to use and love. I am trained in what's called the experience sampling method that I tend to draw on quite a bit, which basically allows you to capture people's lived experiences as people are going through life. So in real time, I know how to kind of capture people's experiences, and I've utilized this for folks both in sort of the corporate, your more kind of typical employees, if you were to say that, well, in a sense, but then also for those who live and work in poverty. So happy to share more in the breakout room. Thanks, Billy.
Absolutely, thank you. And last but not least is Tin.
Hi, everyone. I'm new here, so as you could probably tell, I don't have a lab name selected yet. So any lucky students that decide to work with me can partake in the process of brainstorming. My research follows a few different threads, the first of which is idea implementation. So how do people take abstract ideas or plans, complex, novel, conventional, or otherwise, and find pathways to realizing some of those ideas? There are many, many pathways to success. And I think it's interesting to be able to highlight, some of the ways that people are able to take some of those ideas and translate them into practice. As IO psychologists, I think it's also important for us to recognize the multiple ways that people can take in order to make some of those things happen. The second research stream is violence prevention and crisis management work. So right now I'm working on a grant to study event security collaborations. So how do folks basically design plans and implement them in order to keep concerts and festivals and other sorts of outdoor events safe? It's kind of a fun, interesting area of research. It's fun to be able to go to a concert and say, "Hey, look, I'm doing some field work." So it's a fun area of research that I've taken an interest in recently. The other one is also related to violence prevention. That's threat management research. So recently completed a contract examining the defensible and operational practices of what we call behavioral threat assessment and management teams. Some of that work has been distributed nationwide within the last month, so we're very excited about some of that work as well. And then related to the violence prevention work and the event security work as well, I'm interested in studying the job characteristics, work design, and work environments of folks that are working in what we call skilled trades. So basically anything that involves some kind of skilled training that isn't necessarily an office job, right? So, people that are working as pipe fitters or people that are working to design cabinetry, all those fun sorts of things that also have a nexus with idea implementation as well. And then for my research, I apply mixed methods approaches as well. So the expectation in our program, I think, is that everyone is really well trained quantitatively. So you'll be doing a lot of statistics, but a lot of our research is also well founded on qualitative research as well. So all of the job characteristics that we look at within our own research across all the different faculty, a lot of that research stems initially from some deep qualitative work. So it's important to be able to understand how to do that in order to understand what the realities that people are working with are in their own jobs. Back to you, Billy.
All right, thank you. So that is all of the introductions. So Cody, if I could have you stop recording.